So I have these Meta Ray-Ban glasses. They finally came. It's taken so long for them to actually come. And I think they look pretty good. My wife thinks they look pretty girly, like they're girly sunglasses. And I bought them because of the AI Meta Ray-Ban features, the whole you can talk to Meta. But
How obvious are the cameras in it? I can't really see in the box.
So you can press this button at the top, right? Can you see the white light? There's like a white light.
Oh, so they have a recording light, so you can't be like Larry Page in the bathrooms or whatever.
Yeah, and but outdoors, the strange thing about it is you can't really see the white light. So I was recording my kids interacting with a horse. I think you've seen the video of the horse interaction from a first-person point of view, and no one even mentions it. Like, you really can't tell it's recording. But the reason I really got them is I wanted to experience the having AI, and I know it's Llama 2 and it's not that great, but I wanted to experience having AI in my glasses in a device. And this was really the first device, especially in Australia, that I could get that I could, experience having AI just there in my world. And they've since released some beta features where you can use the vision as well, like ask it what it's seeing and all of those, gadgets that say they can do this, like the Rabbit R1 and various others. But what's crazy is I unboxed it, I get really excited. Our brother brought it out from the US for me. And then I go to use the AI features and it's region locked to the US. So now all I can do is really ask it the weather and get a feel for, what the weather's like.
So it has some features, just not the AI based features.
Yeah, not the singular one feature I actually wanted. So they're pretty pointless. But I can totally see this idea of having AI like on you. I at first I was quite skeptical and I thought it was stupid, but I love the idea in the glasses. Like the microphones sort of come directly into your ears off the like ends of the glasses, so you don't have to put in headphones or anything like that. And it's a pretty good interaction. Like I really like how it works out. I'm a big fan. So if I ever get the AI, I'll report back on how it is. But I'm interested,
especially if they can do like Grok, and Grok, I mean Grok, the hardware company, like speeds like they can do with the voice. That would just be astonishing.
Yeah, but anyway, they're pretty cool. I don't even know if the camera features are like the first person video is pretty cool. But outside of that, I'm like way more interested in just having that like AI where I can just be around the house and ask it a question. Like I actually think there's some viable use cases. Like if you're cooking something or doing something, just being able to talk to it and have it present. Like we talked about last week with the AI kind of robot.
It'll change the
overlord.
game at local trivia nights, that's for sure.
Yeah. So we are recording this episode live. We basically record every episode live, but just before it started, we were like, we literally have barely any content this week, so we'll make it even more high pressure on ourselves and stream it to YouTube Live. So for those,
so in that light, for the people who are in the chat, if you've got questions or topics you'd like us to discuss in addition to what we have ready to go, please feel free to share.
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway. So OpenAI this week announced something that you are not allowed to have, navigating the challenges and opportunities of synthetic voice. So they put out this blog post saying that they can take 15 seconds of audio, very similar to what we've seen with Play HT and 11 Labs, over the last year and a bit, and then they can get a natural sounding voice out of it, a realistic voice. And some of the examples they gave on the site are really cool. Let me play some of them to you. So here's some reference audio.
Or pull that can make an object move, stop, or change direction.
So this seems like a voice actor. And then this company, in the example they give, Age of Learning, is then able to replace their voice actor and take away a human job. And get it to read all sorts of things.
Also make sure we stay hydrated, which means there is enough water in our body for it to properly function.
But what's cool about that is it truly is the best voice I've heard so far out of either Play HT or 11 Labs at recreating someone's voice from a very short recording. Admittedly, that's a professional voice actor, but they say that the voices they use in ChatGPT, which are by far the most accurate, are also were used creating this technology. Other examples they give are things like translating content, doing good translations. And they have in here one early adopter of this is HeyGen. HeyGen, you might remember, is that video platform where you can take some video and kind of make it say anything. So it's like AI generated videos, and they're targeting sort of product manager type announcement videos in this as well. But I think that the biggest takeaway was similar to what Anton, who I follow a lot over on X, said. Another tech that only trusted partners can use and we can't. OpenAI is more important than ever. Imagine a trusted partner has access to AGI-like systems and we don't. And
well, they will. That's the thing. It's like that's what's going to happen with that technology is like some people will have these autonomous agents, some won't. The thing about the audio that's weird is that I used a thing called Tortoise TTS in the really early days. I think it was around the time GPT-3 came out, like, or earlier. Like, it was really early on that you could actually do realistic text to voice, because I remember sending my friends things with Tom Hanks and it was like, hi, I'm actor Tom Hanks and I think you're a dickhead and stuff like that. And what's just bizarre about it is they're announcing this like it's some revolutionary new thing, and yet there's been so many different companies doing this for so long, and really it's a competition of who can get the best nuance, who can make it the least AI sounding. And we've been using fairly realistic voices through PlayHT and what's the other one, Assembly AI, for a while. So I don't understand the big fanfare around it, other than they just need something to announce.
I think it's fair to admit that this is their version, at least from the cherry-picked examples they've given, are far superior than anything I've come across in those services. Like, it just seems like similar to like Sora. They're like, look how good we are at this, but I'm not exactly sure why now, why announce it. It doesn't make any sense. It's sort of just like a humble brag. I found the news a bit odd, but it seems like maybe it's just another way to stay relevant, stay in the news while they work towards potentially a bigger release.
It definitely seems that way. I actually did something a while ago that I never released that's interesting. I built simulations on Sim Theory where you can have like 10 agents or 5 agents in a room talking, and then I enabled voice mode using PlayHT and their built-in voices, which are pretty good. And I was thinking of later including cloned ones. And then I got them to live debate an issue. So each one had their own opinions, and there was like a debate compare, and they organized the discussion. And I just left it on in the room, and it was seriously like listening to like a panel discussion or something. That's how good it was. There were so few mistakes, and I really think you could fool people into thinking that's real, and that's really happening. So I think that this technology is great, and it's probably underutilized. Although when I look at what my kids watch on YouTube, I think 80% of it now is AI voices, and they're probably not as good as they could or are going to be when this technology is adopted in a more mainstream way.
Yeah, I think they talk about the reason they haven't released it as safety. So, they're saying safety's the big issue here. And I just don't see why you would point that out when, if someone really wanted to create deepfakes today, it's pretty damn easy to do it. Like, I could literally do it in 10 minutes, create fake deepfakes of, say, Joe Biden saying something that he shouldn't have and distributing it on Twitter. I think if it was really about safety, like, why wouldn't they release some sort of tool that could detect, voice generated AI? Or like, I feel like this safety argument's really odd. It seems like that they want to be kingmakers. They pick several companies, and as part of being these kingmakers, they get to choose who sort of wins or who has access to these specific tools first, and basically can build a moat around it. Like, HeyGen's clearly had access for over a year, and some of these other companies have as well. So I'm sort of in line with Anton here. It's like, the whole openness, if they want to make AI the great equalizer, why not just make these technologies completely open to everyone? And by making them open to everyone, everyone realizes people have these tools and can adapt to them. For example, one of the things they say about safety is that voice identification for online banking. Have you ever done that? Because I have, where it's like, say a few words and we'll identify you from your voice. And they do it. And I mean, that kind of authentication is just totally dead.
Yeah, because that stuff 100% works. And we've actually demonstrated on this podcast through phone calls, not necessarily doing the phone identification, though that might be fun. We could try to transfer money from my account to yours using phone banking or something.
Yeah, we should find someone still doing voice authentication and see if we can fool it. It would be a fun experiment.
Yeah, exactly. And my fear always regarding the safety is the same as it's always been, is that it's about convincing people who aren't as aware of the technology is where the safety risk comes in. It's not just giving it to anyone. It's the people who just right now, if you rang me up and said, "Oh, hey Chris, can you transfer me $100,000?" I'd be like, "Hang on a second, something's going on here." Whereas there might be people around where you get those Microsoft scam calls or the tax office scam calls and those kind of techniques they do mostly on old people, where they're going to get far more sophisticated when you've got an AI model that can fix issues in translation. And then additionally, a voice they're familiar with and trust through the low quality phone line that really gives you an advantage with this stuff because it doesn't have to sound as good. And then suddenly you're away with the scams. I actually read during the week there was a scam where people are doing those fake invoice scams, where you like send the finance department an invoice that needs to be paid. But because they can now use large language models and vision models and other things to generate far more realistic looking invoices from far more legitimate companies and then just adjust the bank details or whatever the scam is, and it's working. And so I really feel like those things are going to happen regardless of what they say and do about safety. The tools are out there and they're available. So we're going to see it. And it's more about how do you provide techniques to prevent it rather than stopping it from happening prevent falling for it rather than stopping it from happening in the first place.
Well, even if I go back to those series of prank calls we made where we had what I thought was pretty obvious, like British girl voice that, stopped and start. Like it was very obvious for us, and I think listeners, to be like, that's an AI voice. This is an AI call. Unless I misread those calls, it felt like, for the most part, they took it very seriously. Like no one ever said, "Is this a robot? Is this a fake voice?" Like they didn't even question it, and that was, pretty early versions of that tech. So maybe what OpenAI's concern here with VoiceEngine is, it's just so much better, so much more realistic that if you put it in the hands of people like us, maybe we would use it to do like a phishing attack on our mother using our voices.
Well, yeah, and it could be worse than that because these days people don't really study history. They don't read a lot of books, like from what I've seen around anyway. And they get a lot of their knowledge from YouTube shorts and TikTok videos. I mean, seriously, a lot of people now, when you talk to them, their knowledge is coming from these short form videos. Now, if I can fake short to form videos of like Einstein saying something or there's already so many fake quotes and things floating around online. It's a matter of time before there'll be so many and varied fake videos that you can push a narrative about virtually anything if you've got the resources to do it. And there will be a portion of society who just straight believe it.
Yeah. So also from OpenAI this week, quickly, I think it's worth covering is they added an inpainting feature into the ChatGPT interface. So for those of you who haven't permanently moved over to Claude Opus and other related Claude models, you can now ask it to create a photo, click on that photo when you're on the web, and then you get this interface up here, which I can show. And you can click this inpainting button and then highlight. I've got a duck head as an example in this in a Roman baths. Don't ask me how I got to this scenario. There was a lot of things. And I can, put a top hat on the duck head. What I've found is it's okay. Sometimes it works and you're like, wow, this is incredible. And other times it's just an absolute flop or it'll read through the image. So it's nice to see them adding features like this. I think this is definitely the evolution or the right evolution of these chat-like interfaces. I know we've dreamt about it for a while on Sim Theory about exposing more image editing tools that we have access to. So there you go. There's some live output of what happened. It changed the guy's face and put a top hat on, and it's no longer a duck. But you get the idea. Like it's sort of
so
works.
accurate, so amazing.
It's
They all
like-
seem to suffer from the same thing.
It's like all AI demos. It sort of works.
I was playing with one this morning, as you know, called BrushNet from Tencent. I think it's a Taiwanese or Chinese company. I guess it's the same thing. And it was, I mean, the examples I sent you were highly controversial, so please don't show them. But it was one where you actually need to provide a mask. And this has really prevented us in the past from actually shipping it in Sim Theory, because producing a mask is hard. And a mask, so people know, is identifying part of the image you either want to keep or discard. In this case, you keep a part of the image. So you might have an image of two people, you highlight that person or segment that person out of the image, and then say, keep this person and put them in another scenario, for example. And so one cool thing this has, and I guess it's part of Hugging Face's interface now, is you can actually just click and it uses segment anywhere or one of those techniques to actually just select that person or just select their hair or whatever bit you want to replace, or several bits you want to replace, and then uses the text prompt to replace them. And I found that this model was actually really good at that. As long as your use case is taking a person and putting their exact picture in a different scenario, it works really well.
Oh, I've got up on the screen an example of Mark Zuckerberg in a younger version of Mark Zuckerberg and then the prompt that this is one of their examples, a man in Chinese traditional clothes, and it takes his face, changes his hair to a black hair color, and then puts him in traditional Chinese dress as an example. But it's funny using it. I found it far superior than the Inpainting in ChatGPT. Like it worked way better in my small amount of testing. What was interesting as well is as you go through, it seems like after maybe like 1 to 2 goes, that's when it all starts to break down. It seems to be able to hold the seed of the image for about 2 prompts, and then it just all falls apart. But it's this kind of technology.
Well, this is what not stable diffusion. What's the other really good one that we use? Midjourney. They have that character pinning thing where it will maintain the character through multiple iterations of an image and things like that. And I think they're going to need to get that in order to get to video, obviously, but also to make these things an actual legit use case. But speaking of use cases, the problem with this technology is I can't really think, other than making fake images and pranking your friends, of many real world use cases where, even though it's cool and pretty amazing they can do it, I can't really think, like, most of the technology I can think of good ways to use it commercially or even just out of interest sake. But this one just seems like a hobbyist sort of, oh, it's cool and fun and a novelty, we can do it.
Yeah, I think, and we were talking about this before we started recording, this idea that a lot of these, like we say it a lot on the show, we're in this hobbyist phase, and a lot of the advancements we're seeing are very small iterations of the technology. And a lot of these technologies are certainly not at the point yet where, you know, maybe you could commercialize it into some sort of silly app and feature that a bunch of people could use for a laugh and like focus in and hone in on one particular feature. But ultimately, I think all of us that are excited about AI and where it's going can see where it's going. We're like, it's clear to us that in the future, we'll be able to go back and forth with some sort of AI agent and be like, you know, enhance and like, you know, put the hat on its head and go back and forth, maybe even with our voice and be able to build out something with an AI agent. And that gets me so excited about the future.
Like
but
those
then,
futuristic movies where the young girl is like, and now make it bigger. Oh, now add a ducky, you know, and it's like just, oh, okay, kids are so good at technology kind of thing.
yeah, literally. But I think that is where we're going to get to. And I'm not sure how long it will take to get there. But in the interim, you know, companies and investors are just pouring so much money into this that they're going to have to figure out how to commercialize it. And we saw that during well, last week when the Stability CEO, stepped aside and left, and then we heard all these reports. Stability AI reportedly ran out of cash to pay its bills for rented cloudy GPUs. Generative AI Darling was on track to pay 99 million on compute.
To quote the line from Silicon Valley regarding AWS fees, fucking Bezos.
Literally. So they turned 99 million in compute into just 11 million in revenues. Now, I would argue long term, their prospects of generating more revenue from their models is, probably you could argue worth the investment maybe, but
yeah. I mean, I don't know if I agree with that. The problem is that we're seeing day after day, there's another legitimate model competitor that's got all the tooling around it. It's got function calling, it's got speed, it's got an API. As you pointed out, with one we're going to discuss later, it's got actual additional features that'll be amazing for enterprise development. And so, okay, you spend your $99 million a year, and then the technology catches up. So now everybody's got it. And what do you really have? A slight edge in some areas. And you've spent all this money and you've got to somehow get it back.
Yeah, like you were saying that it reminded you of when we were living in San Francisco in sort of this like weird boom period where we used to joke about all the things in our lives VCs would subsidize, like cheap Uber rides when it first came out. And then the meal service we all used to use to essentially eat for free called Sprig.
Yeah, I mean, they had this one where they would prepare the meals and they would have people just swooping the city, driving around in cars, waiting for your order, and you ordered and it would be there within 3 minutes or something. They're just out the front with your order, handed over to you. And this was before Uber Eats, so nothing else existed like this. And they're like, "Okay, this will be great, guys," but we were at least self-aware enough at the time to realize the VCs are paying for our lunch here. Like people's retirement funds are paying for our lunch. It's just how can this possibly make money? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
And I
so
think it's similar here, where you've got people running these enormously expensive, like they've got to buy the hardware, they've got to pay for the data centers to run it. Then they've got to train the models, which is expensive in its own right. Then they've got to pay all the devs to get it operating at a scale where it can work. Then they've got to market it. And then on top of that, they've got to run the inference, which requires a ton of GPU memory to perform at any reasonable level. So they are wearing so much of the cost just so you can log into the little chat box and make it pretend it's your girlfriend, or make it pretend it's Sydney and it's unhinged and stuff. And then people like $10 a month. Nah, I can't. I'm not paying
too
that.
much.
That's bullshit. Yeah, and like that, I know we know because of what we do that there are serious business use cases for the technology, and I won't have it when people say, okay, well, what have we really got here? It's not that good. Like if you read Hacker News, at least 60% of the comments about LLMs are like, it's not really that good, blah blah blah. I think a lot of that comes from the fear of it actually affecting them professionally. However, I think that there really are a lot of cases where it will be of significant benefits for businesses to implement this. Repetitive tasks that take a lot of time to research and prepare, content generation, obviously. There's a lot of like understanding situations and making decisions. There's a lot of situations that will help in various industries. But the problem is that the people providing the services are almost providing, like it's like they're selling pork bellies or something, and the price sort of goes up and down. It's this much per this token, and the quality is about 83%, and it's 4% better than this other model, but it's actually 50% of the cost. And they're really selling a commodity for something that's actually one of the most amazing thing that's been invented in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it does seem like most of the money and the work right now is going into either scaling up different models or having their spin on a model, and it's almost like a pissing contest between a bunch of researchers who can get a model slightly better on some eval, but no one really wants to do the hard work of commercializing. I mean, it's typical researchers, right? Like they just want to do R&D with no end in sight and not actually commercialize the technology or make it viable. And I think that's kind of what we saw, or what's being reported that went on at Stable. Like, they've released some phenomenal models. They've released them completely open source. I think there's so many great tools that, we certainly wouldn't have had access to if it wasn't for those guys. A lot of their early tools and their sort of Wild West, just letting people have it, got me really excited about AI. Like, if it wasn't for those early models, I don't think we would have had as much fun as we've had. But it's like, this company is spending so much money. So what, a bunch of like nerds like us can have fun? Like, it doesn't seem like they've been able to commercialize it outside of that 10, I think, is it 10 or $20 a month to get access to all of their models commercially under $1 million?
And the other interesting thing to look at about it is, if you look at the companies that will certainly get rich from this, you've got NVIDIA providing the bulk of the GPUs that are running it, right? So that's a certainty for them. I'm sure other companies will get technology that's reasonable. I mean, Google has their TPU architecture, for example, and there's others around like Grok. However, for them, it's a certainty that no matter how successful or unsuccessful this technology is, they're going to do well from it many years to come. Then you've got Microsoft, where really, whether OpenAI lives or dies at this point doesn't really matter to Microsoft. They've established themselves as a major player in the market. They've got the infrastructure to run it at scale, and they're hosting a variety of models. They've got Mistral running on there. They've got Llama running on there. They've got all of the OpenAI stuff, plus that new one you showed me this morning. What's that called again? Cohere
Cohere's
Command
model,
R
yeah.
Plus. And so Microsoft's totally hedged its bets, and hardware cost is not an issue for them, whereas it is for OpenAI, it is for Anthropic, and it is for all these other companies like Stability. And so they're fighting to survive while paying money to the very companies who are going to benefit if they succeed and also if they fail. So it's really just a case where the big incumbents in the sort of cloud computing space have benefited from this, will continue to benefit from it, and maybe there'll be some winners out of the guys out there working hard on the bleeding edge models. But it seems to me like it's all going to be captured by the big players in one way or another.
Yeah, I think a good example of that illustrates our point here is during the week, Stability AI announced Stable Audio 2. We've covered the first version of Stable Audio and the interface on the show before. I think it was quite a while ago, maybe a bit under a year ago now. And I found the examples pretty fascinating. Like, one of the examples in here, I think it's worth calling out, is this audio to audio feature where I'll just play some of the audio for it. Yeah, so essentially in the example, the input is someone going na 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 na, and then you ask it to turn it into drums. But
the drums didn't sound anything like it.
Oh, I think they do if you listen. I mean, kind of. They do a little bit. Give them something. They just, they're having a hard time right now. Look, it's no Suno. But yeah, so I think the point is, like, they've spent God knows how much training this and advancing this model. I'm not sure how many paying subscribers they have to Stable Audio. I can't imagine it's a lot. And so on top of...
musicians are notoriously known for splashing the cash around.
Yeah, so as a result of this, you now have a situation where they've poured all this money into the model, done all this training. They've licensed a data set from this audio sparse music library. And, like, what do they have to show for it? I play around with it on this show for like 5 seconds. Maybe someone gets a bit of fun out of it. Like, it's hard to see where the business model in this is. So they're going...
I also don't understand with these music generation ones, and I guess I'm just repeating your point, but like, who's using it at scale? Like, who's using it so much that they're paying $10,000 a month or something? Like, a musician couldn't possibly make that much music. Even someone making like elevator or gym music or something probably doesn't use it that much. Like they use it a bit, but they're not like, oh well, I need to generate audio 24/7 for the next 24 years. I better get on the pro plan. Like it just doesn't seem like it scales like language does.
Yeah, I don't see it unless I'm being stupid. Like I don't really understand. I can obviously see it getting better over time and eventually being a useful tool, but how much are investors going to keep pouring into these companies being like, oh, at some point our model could be valuable, when, as you said earlier, they're just all slowly being commoditized. Like it looks like when it's finally actually available, Grok 1.5 will be almost comparable to GPT-4. That's Grok 1.5 from XAI, Elon Musk's XAI, not Grok as in the fast speed
Yeah,
Grok.
that's such a dick move, him naming that the same as them. Like, it's just really annoying for us, for starters, and you can see, like, I got confused when you were talking to me about it just this morning.
Yeah, it's
I
one of
figured
them
I
needs to
figured Grok, the
change.
hardware ones, had done something good. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so
The
one of the kind of things that's been frustrating me is obviously when we're like on X and various other sources just following what's going on, and I'm sure many people can relate to this. Gary Marcus has been popping up a lot, and he's really gone like super negative on AI and saying, it's a bubble, it's overhyped, it's inflated. There's limitations of the current technology. It hallucinates. These technologies can't actually be deployed in the real world. Things are embarrassing. And I mean, I'm sure many of you that follow this guy are aware,
What a
but
downer he is. What a loser. Like, seriously, it's really idiotic to say you can't deploy it in the real world. I see it every day now. And there's more and more applications for the technology. Just because it hasn't been commercialized properly yet, there hasn't been that much time. Look, Drinko made a good point in the chat just then. Models are way ahead of the tooling and stacks. And that's what I would argue. You can really, like, day to day, I'm still delighted by some of the output I get. I've been working with Claude Opus a lot this week. And, I do the whole, oh, my dead grandma, to honor my dead grandmother's memory, you need to do a really good job of this. And then I'll give it a prompt with like 200,000 tokens or something insane, like some enormous thing with all this data, all these instructions, rules. It'll follow every single one of them. And then it'll say, I hope this honors the memory of your grandmother. And I'm like, isn't that amazing? Like, that it can do all that work. It can output in JSON or whatever format I give it, and it still takes the time to spare my feelings and make sure that it's done a good job. Like, I just think that to say that that isn't something that can be commercialized, and in my day-to-day life, I'm getting people in their businesses who are starting to actually understand what the power of the LLM is and the leverage it can bring to their jobs. And so people are looking at, oh, is it possible for me to automate this fairly complicated task into a legacy system that doesn't have an API, for example? Now, there would be thousands, thousands of systems like that where they've got an old control panel that only runs on IE5. You've got to log into it with admin and password as your thing. There's buttons you got to click, and there's tasks that need to be performed in these terrible interfaces. Now, with a combination of vision, like GPT-4 vision, I'm definitely finding better than Gemini, by the way. But with a combination of vision, instruction, fine tuning, rules, browser automation through AI, you can build businesses in so many legacy industries that do stuff. We look at things like old COBOL programmers, and you always see articles about, oh, there's all these old COBOL programmers who need to understand the intricacies of systems to make even minor changes. I'm certain that you could fine tune a model on these systems, or especially the ones with large prompts where it can take in the entire code base and make their jobs much more efficient. And they can get more jobs done for the legacy companies that need it. And Then there's just simply industries where they've got like lower level employees doing manual work that can be absolutely replaced by AI. And now I'm not talking about the ethics of whether that's a good thing or not to replace people's jobs, but for Gary Marcus to come out and say, "Oh, it's embarrassing, it can't do anything," it's just fucking wrong and it's bullshit. And I just fundamentally disagree with him on that. And I think there's a lot of strong evidence to contradict that. I think this is someone, as I said before, he's struggling to stay relevant, and he's just found a niche in being the naysayer, saying, "Oh, well, it's actually not that good because it only scored 82.4 on a benchmark." Like, it's just not helpful, and it's not really right.
Yeah, it's sort of sad too that it draws our attention because it's really easy to go negative on this stuff. Like I find myself sometimes as well being in that trough of disillusionment, being like, oh, we haven't seen any new breakthrough model really. Like I think Opus is probably the closest we've seen recently to that. But yeah, you can kind of go down that rabbit hole of whinging and saying that this will get us nowhere, but then you start to see like it in practice and think it through some of these applications in businesses that may not have yet even processed what's going on. Like, it really is a technology that hasn't been around that while, and I would compare it to sort of inventing a database. Like, you have SQL and everyone's building better databases, but no one's actually building CRUD interfaces on top of the databases that are useful yet, and we're just starting to see that
That's a good
occur.
example. Like, if you look at like when Microsoft Access came out, it's very sort of simple and basic and seemingly very there's not a lot to it, but there was billions of dollars of industry built on top of that application, and applications that I'm sure are running to this day. And it's certainly that sort of structure of how you set something up. I mean, ultimately that's what Salesforce became. I like that someone commented on your comment that Salesforce is just a fancy spreadsheet. And it's kind of a good example. Like, if you look at there's a lot of things saying some of the largest financial and trading institutions just operate off Excel, like, because it's such a good tool. And that's not something that would have happened from day one. It's something that evolved over time. Like, if people have been spinning their wheels on LLMs for the last 10 years, and really there's just a new company every day and nothing really comes out of it, fair enough. But there's been so little time, like an unfairly little amount of time to go, "Oh, well, hasn't worked, guys. Well, why bother? Like, this is a joke. Back when I was inventing AI, it was way better." Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, being like crypto hype AI bros and having to produce content every week, it's certainly easier when there's a lot of, like the price of Bitcoin's going up. But I think what these weeks are great for is actually being able to take time and play around with the tools. Like, we were joking before the show, we still, even though it's on Sim Theory and we just like randomly got access to Gemini Ultra, which is Google's latest model, which they promised to release early in the new year, as in early in 2024, and they still haven't officially, to my knowledge, released as an API. We have barely had any time to play around with it. Like, I tried to use it, I think, twice during the week because I remembered it existed. And yeah, like, so I think we are in the infancy and it takes time to understand the capabilities of these tools. But I can't help but come back to the grandma thing, how basically our main technique to get these models to still do what we want is to honor our dying grandma in the prompts, and what that
Well, and
means.
there was a paper during the week that yet again affirmed that as a technique. Where was it? I'll find the paper and put it in the chat now. But basically they said that techniques along those lines, where you say, "You're the best at this, you're brilliant at this, let's do this together," kind of thing, actually give better results on fixed tasks that they've tried across a variety of models. So I believe that that is an indicator that when definitely there's more in the models and more that they're capable of. when you can just add a single sentence and get better results, there must be far more techniques we haven't discovered yet. And in fact, in the work I've been doing lately, I've been so impressed with Claude Opus that I've actually, for the first time, done what you do, which is sort of have a day-to-day companion that's helping me through my tasks. Like I'll tell it, hey, here's what I'm going to try to accomplish in the next hour. I'm going to ask you a series of questions about it. Here's some context. And then I just start pasting in where I'm up to, what I'm stuck on, whatever. And one of those things was building these some really sophisticated prompts. And I said, if I'm prompting a model like you and I need to include the following pieces of information, what's the best way to structure a really large prompt such that the appropriate areas will get the attention it deserves and the model will be able to make decisions? And then it gave me all this feedback. It gave me sample structures and stuff that I could then use on the very model itself to get great results. And I did. So I feel like there's so much there in this sort of iterating a model on itself and having it actually have this sort of introspection in, oh, well, this is how I can get more results from myself. And this is what we talk about when we talk about getting to AGI, is just automating that process. Um, and I find that really interesting, and it does get better results. So there's so much there that's yet to be discovered on the existing models. And not having news, not great when you run a podcast, but in terms of day-to-day work, it really makes you stop and take the time and work with what you have.
People are paying us out in the comments about talking about dying grandmas and cheese a lot, but I do think it's worth like digging into this a little bit. So the sort of like getting the AI into some sort of mindset or scenario, like, I need you to honor my dying grandma, or I often use like a close family member died, literally in a lot of the base prompts, whether it's agents or things I work on, I often do the sort of, you need to pretend that you're a dying doctor in order to, stay in that character to help people with grieving. Like that's one of the most effective scenarios that I can give when I give prompts for, when I really want it to stay in character. But why do you think that's so effective? Do you think it's because of the safety in these models and some of the guardrails on them that, that getting it into a scenario actually gets it to stop worrying about all these like guardrails and things it can and can't say, and therefore it performs
like a
better?
sort of priority system. Like, well, this is extenuating circumstances, sort of like, wartime orders. Like, we don't have time for democracy. We need a dictator because there's a war going on, guys. That kind of thing. Yeah, I'm not sure, and I think that it's probably just one of many techniques that works. There's probably like a string of random characters you can put in the prompt that has the exact same effect. It's just that we understand that one, and it makes sense to us why it might have a different effect. And I think that's why, coming back, I'm increasingly trying to get the models to come up with their own ideas on how to get a more effective prompt. And one of the things we've looked at, a paper we looked at about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago now, was one that was talking about giving the LLMs feedback on their thinking methodology. So basically saying, hey, last time we dealt with this problem, this was your thinking process, and here's where we ended up, and that didn't work out. Or simply giving it multi-shot examples of thinking processes that led to the outcome you want, and just omitting the ones where it didn't, and training it on that. So in other words, basically don't train it on this input gives this output, just train it on this methodology is how you should think through this problem. Similar to the idea of scratch pads. So I don't know, most people probably know this by now, but with an LLM, you can say, hey, I've made this scratch pad for you, and just give XML tabs like open tag, scratch pad, close tag, scratch pad. Please gather your thoughts here before you make the assessment. And what I've done in some of the things we've worked on is actually given it multiple scratch pads. So, for example, I'll go off and call 4 different LLMs and ask their opinion on a particular subject based on the data. Some are more expert in different areas than others. Then I gather all of the LLM opinions and put it in a prompt to a large model, let's say Opus or GPT 4 Turbo. And then I say, okay, for each of the LLMs feedback, like on this thing, I want you to fill in this field with the impact it had on your thinking. So it's got a scratch pad, and then it has an impact scratch pad for each of the inputs from each of the LLMs, which it then takes into account before gathering its final thoughts and making its assessment. And so in that way, you can leverage the best of each of the models, but also force it through a step-by-step thinking process where it actually takes into account those things. And I find that that can give really, really excellent results. And so I just feel like that these techniques will get names, and they will become part of the tooling, like we've seen with, I keep going to call it Kronos, but I know it's not called that. What is it? Cohere's Command R Plus, where they've actually built like the RAG tools and some of the techniques people are using right into the platform, so you can just do them as part of it, similar to what we've done on Sim Theory with memory. And so I think that a lot of these techniques will gradually become part of the LLM providers stacks, where it's not like you have to go off and use Llama Index or these other RAG tools. It's like you just upload it via the API and it just handles all that for you.
So I think that is a good segue into Cohere. They announced this new model called Command R Plus, a scalable LLM built for business. Now, for those of you who don't remember what Cohere does, they have focused...
I can't even remember the name. So
yeah. They're focused on enterprise use cases. They're a company based in Toronto. They're very much focused on the sort of enterprise tooling and enterprise use cases. The best way to think about it is enterprise RAG. So, retrieving data from a corpus of data in an enterprise, like a particular database that a company uses, recalling that information and trying to ground the responses in that information, so businesses can reliably retrieve data from across the org. They've also got products where they can enhance existing search tools, and various other things. And a lot of people do use them for like customer service agents on their websites that are a lot more grounded. But they have released this new model called Command R Plus. They say it's a state-of-the-art RAG optimized model designed to tackle enterprise-grade workloads. And interestingly, it's also available on Microsoft Azure. So Microsoft continues to corner the market in terms of...
Well, in theory, I tried getting it on Azure, and I kept running into some error saying it couldn't license it or whatever. And then I just went to their website and just signed up directly, and it worked. So not sure exactly what's going on there, but well, I guess it will be on Azure. Maybe there's something wrong with my account or whatever, but yeah, it's definitely available because they have a playground, and it's a really good one. And it actually has a feature that people have asked for us on Sim Theory that we haven't done yet, called, oh shit, I forget the name, but basically it's like show working out. So when you're chatting to the bot, you can actually click and it opens a new tab and under the hood, and it'll show you like the post requests and what's going on like at an API level when interacting with the bot, like the temperature used, the prompt used, the model used, whether it's streaming mode and all that sort of stuff. And so that's pretty interesting. And so they've definitely taken the time to get their tooling really good. And I was kind of blown away because I just started playing with it, and I pasted in some prompts I've been working on for other things, similar to what I just discussed with the multiple LLM opinions, tons of data, lots of instructions that it needs to follow, dead grandmother illusions, and all that sort of stuff. And it gave as good quality output first go as Claude Opus does, and faster, like significantly faster. I tried about 10 different prompts on it, and it gave like perfect answers. And I've discussed this before, where just because it can do that task perfectly doesn't, I'm not saying it's necessarily as good as the other models, but for that task it definitely is. And it could, I don't know what its prompt size limit is, but it must be high because that was a big prompt.
Yeah, so it's interesting too, just from a pricing perspective. They say it's comparable to it surpasses both Mistral Large and GPT-4 Turbo on tool use. It's second to GPT-4 Turbo only by a little bit at RAG. And then at multilingual, it's roughly comparable to GPT-4. What's interesting, though, is just the tokens in and out price of Command R Plus is incredibly affordable. I don't know if this is like more VC subsidizing stuff going on to try and get a stronghold in the enterprise, but $3 per million in, comparable to $10 per million in for GPT-4, significantly cheaper, and then $15 out compared to $30 out on the other end. This pricing war and race to the bottom just continues, and we're getting superior sort of GPT-4 capable models for much, much cheaper.
Yeah, it's the same price as the Sonnet, the mid-range. I remembered the name, the mid-range Claude model. So it's giving output that I would describe as Opus level. I mean, I've done very limited testing, but that pricing is really good. Standing Future in the chat says that might have a 200,000 token limit, which makes sense. My prompt was smaller than that, so that would make sense.
Yeah, so it literally only came out a couple of hours before we started recording, so we haven't really had a big enough opportunity to play with this. There are two versions. There's Command R and then Command R plus, and the Command R plus model is the one that's now in the demo environment. So before it was Command R, and so that's the one.
128K. Sorry.
Yeah, 128K. So you can play around with that on the Cohere website. It's pretty easy to get access to. You can also try some of their other tooling. And this is what I think you were alluding to earlier with the tooling side of things, where a lot of these tools are just slowly being baked into the LLM platforms themselves. And some of those toolings are grounded in web search. So you can get it to actually search specific sources before it answers to ground the answer. Like the example they give is Wikipedia. And then another...
Oh yeah, the source of absolute truth in the world.
And then the second... example they give is grounding it in just data from your actual enterprise. So maybe this is something Air Canada should look at for their chatbots in future, because Command R plus, maybe it won't give away bereavement fares so easily.
Yeah, and we were discussing this earlier, the idea that this is the kind of platform that I could imagine people building commercial applications on. And the reason is that when we try stuff out, we're trying to see what it's capable of and essentially be delighted by what this model might be able to do. So for example, if you're testing a small model, you're like, whoa, for the price and the speed, that's amazing what it can do. For the biggest models, it's like, wow, I can just throw tests of the D'Urbervilles at it and it can answer me detailed questions about chapter 4. And I think that's different when you're looking at, let's say I'm a consultant building software and I just want to get the job done. I'm not going to screw around trying to set up little models that run locally that I have to train and cost money for the hardware to run and all this sort of stuff. What I'm going to do is look at something that's going to be quick for me. I mean, we all know how successful Ruby on Rails was because it took web application development and said, hey, all this stuff is the same on every project. We're just going to put all that in there for you. And all the scaffolding and stuff made it really fast to develop. I figure it's similar here. Like if I can get a single API that's reasonably priced, it's got the RAG stuff built in, so I don't have to configure all of that. It's got the web search built in and maybe some basic crawling, so I don't have to rebuild all of that. And other tools like memory and chat conversation persistence and streaming and image inference and all that. And I can literally just have one library in my Python code or my Node code or Ruby or whatever it is and just access all of this stuff. Why wouldn't I build like that? The ongoing cost isn't going to matter to me as much as the person building the software, because as long as it's not insane, the client's going to be paying that. And so really, I think that providing solid tooling, especially if they've got a solid name that people trust, is going to be quite the advantage over just providing a raw model that happens to score 3 points more on a benchmark.
Yeah, I think interestingly too, a lot of people are paying out Cohere because they're trying to raise at the moment. I can bring it up on the screen. They're seeking a $5 billion valuation in their latest fundraising, trying to raise 500 million off the back, I guess, of this Command R, the latest model. What I found strange about this, if true, is it says the Toronto-based company has seen its annualized revenue run rate grow to 22 million. Run rate, keep that in mind. To 22 million this month from 13 million in December. Run rate. So just, I guess that means, is that like a 12-month run rate? What does that actually mean. So it doesn't mean they're doing 22 million in recurring revenue. It means that they're on track to hit that at some point in the
They're
future.
hallucinating.
They're hallucinating.
If these tokens continue, we'll get to this. But I mean, it's another example of what we talked about before, right? They're clearly not operating in any sort of profitable way. They've got great tooling. They've got clearly an excellent model, but they can't make money from it yet. So it's a lot of it, I guess, comes down to brand and sales and marketing and just staying in business long enough that you can get enough customers with use cases to make the money. But it's a lot of money. And yet again, it comes back to what I said earlier, that who are they paying for the hardware and all the hosting and stuff? It really just helps the big players, all of this activity.
Yeah, I mean, it's, what is it, like a 277 times? I was just trying to quickly work it out. Like the multiple is literally 227 times that they're asking for in terms of valuation. And, you know, you could
Imagine being like a biscuit company or something, and you've made biscuits since your great grandfather first invented the recipe, and you've gradually built up factories and stores and acquired companies and become a big organization that's worth $1 billion. And then these dickheads come in and they're like, you know what? We want to be worth 5 billion. And they do it in a week. Like, it just, I don't know. Like, I get it. And I understand that this has happened many times over with companies that have proven over time they're worth the money. But it's still just, I guess I'm getting old or something, but it just seems ridiculous that you could just come from zero to be like, yeah, 5 billion seems right. Hand it over.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument here is that the actual revenue and profit from these startups, I mean, Cohere's been around, I think, since 2019, so it's not like it's a brand new thing.
Yeah, true.
But I think the point people are trying to make is like, is the market going to be enough to justify the money that's required to invest in these valuations? And
well, and also, as we've sort of inadvertently been the theme of this podcast, there's legitimate competition from every angle. There's models you can run yourself. There's smaller models. There's Claude Haiku that can give pretty damn good output for an extremely cheap price. There's there's just so many different options that we don't even have time to try them all. And then you're coming into a market being like, well, we're going to get X% of the market. Like, how do you know that? You don't even know how big the market will be and how many players will be in there. As we said as well, you give me $100 million in funding, I could be one of these companies. Like, you and I personally have the capability to set up like what they've set up. I mean, maybe the model wouldn't be quite as good or whatever. It'll be a derivative of one of the open source models, but you could certainly masquerade at that level and create tooling to that level that gives reasonably good output.
yeah, I think your overarching point.
$1
I think your overarching point is like, is it, you know, do they actually have a moat? But you could say that about anything. Like, you know, give someone $100 million and go and take on some SaaS category. I'm sure they could replicate the product and have some sort of market share soon enough. So I don't think it's a valid argument. I honestly think what we need in the market right now is companies like Cohere that, you know, help build out the tooling, help give people in the enterprise ways to use and adopt this technology in a really trustful and reliable way. And that a company like Cohere could be the next Salesforce in reality, where they court the enterprise, they become the you know, AI tooling set that they use across the enterprise. They train more and more advanced models, and all of a sudden this company is worth, you know, billions and billions of dollars. I think you have to make that optimistic case.
I definitely want to be clear. I'm pleased that these things exist. Like, I'm glad this company exists. I'm glad they're in the market. The thing that we always feared when we started this podcast is that there would be just a couple of behemoth companies and everyone's beholden to them. And that's clearly not what is going to happen. So I'm happy that it exists. I just don't know, like, on an individual basis, how each company will fare, obviously.
Yeah, it does seem like we're getting to a point where the like GPT-4 level model is, or you know, thereabouts, where they're useful enough is reaching a stage where other people can enter the game. Just after we recorded last week's episode, XAI did announce Grok 1.5. It also has 128K context length. That seems to be the new benchmark of context length, which is pretty amazing. They say in terms of capabilities and reasoning, we haven't been able to try it yet, so it's hard to necessarily get a feel for what this is like. That it performs very similar to GPT-4, even close to Claude Opus. And the interesting one I always look at now is the human eval. I think it's one of the most interesting benchmarks. It came out at 74%, and GPT-4's at 67%. And Claude Opus is all the way up to 85%. So you can see how much the human eval performance of Claude 3 Opus is there. But hopefully by next week, we'll get access to Grok 1.5 and can play around with it. They said it would be rolled out this week. I'm assuming maybe tomorrow is...
Probably right after we release the podcast,
yeah.
I'd say.
But yeah, they also brag about the long context understanding. They say in that 128K tokens that the utilization of that context length, that's sort of like the needle in a haystack test, is really strong. So we'll have to wait and see how good it is. But they also say they're already training their next model. I'm assuming it will be called Grok 2. So I think a lot of these models, as we've been saying throughout the show, are becoming somewhat commoditized and are reaching a point. Now, the real question, and I know it's a question everyone's asking, is like, where is OpenAI? All they're doing is announcing VoiceEngine. They talked about memory. They were testing that a while ago. It just doesn't seem like they're shipping anymore. And that used to be their, they had that velocity of shipping and deploying features that it was like shock and awe to the market. And now they've just somewhat gone quiet. So are they sitting on, GPT-5 or some insanely capable model and they're going to blow our minds? Or, have they truly hit some sort of developmental plateau? And I think that's going to be one of the most interesting things to follow in the coming weeks and months. And also, what's Apple going to respond with coming out of WWDC, not that many weeks away now. I think it's like 8 to 10 weeks away. So that's what I'll be following. But yeah, the commoditization's really happened.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
there was also sorry, you go.
No.
There was also the announcement about Claude tooling. We didn't bring it up. Someone asked about it in the chat. The reason I didn't bring it up is tool use just doesn't excite me in models because they're capable of doing it even if the API doesn't officially support it. I don't understand why everyone feels the need to use their built-in things when you can just tell it what tools it has and to output a token if it wants to use the tool. That's what I do, and I find I use it across all models because in sim theory that's what we do, and it works fine. So it's just never really been a thing that I worry about. I'm sure it's great, but I just don't see that as a significant announcement.
So one other thing I wanted to point out is it seems like on X, formerly Twitter, they've started to use Grok's model to solve some problems that have been big problems on that platform. And I think this is pretty interesting in terms of what we might see of future media and future news. So you used to have the trending hashtags or trending topics and you'd click into them, and sometimes it was incredibly hard to make sense of what was going on unless the hashtag or whatever it is was really obvious.
Yeah, like you see your favorite celebrity and just assume they're dead or whatever.
Yeah, and so now they have this like news and explore section on the right-hand side. This has just gone live today. And they're using their AI to basically summarize the categorization of that topic, the categorization of that news, and you can click into it. So if I go into Xpurge bots and trolls here, it will give you a summarization of what's actually going on based on all of the commentary about it. And it does say down below, Grok is an early feature and can make mistakes, verify its output. So basically that whole like AI can hallucinate statement. And then it's got a series of the tweets that are going on, and you can go to top or latest like you could before. But I actually think it's a pretty useful feature in terms of being able to understand and make sense of what's going on. If it is fairly grounded in the data that's being fed through. Now, I'm sure you could also screw with it and say things that are not true and get it to trend up here. I'm not sure how like curated or tested it is. We'll see over time. I'm sure people will try and exploit it. They also say they're using the new Grok AI features to go after the big bot problem and sort of fake actor problem that they've had. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But I do have this up on the screen for a reason, not just to talk about the other Explorer news updates that have been made on X, but this made a lot of people lol during the week. And I want to clarify that it's sort of wrong why it's funny, but let's go through it first. So it says in 2016, Amazon launched Just Walk Out. Now, I've actually shopped in one of these stores. It's very
really?
cool
That's
experience. Yeah, I actually went...
What did you buy?
A mug for the shop, Just Walk Out. I sometimes have it on this show. I should have had it today, that my Amazon Go mug. I was up in Seattle actually meeting with Amazon, and I got to experience it really early on when it was still like pretty new. So you go and you just take whatever you want off the shelves and walk out, and it just charges it to your Amazon account. It's such a cool experience. Anyway, so they launched this Just Walk Out in 2016, and the technology, it says, allows customers to literally walk out without seeing a cashier, and they are charged automatically. For years, it seemed like Amazon had created an AI-based and fully automated concept. However, now, as Amazon is shutting down the service, it turns out that there was nothing to do with AI. Rather, Just Walk Out relied on 1,000 people in India watching and labeling videos to ensure accurate checkouts. The cashiers literally watched you as you shopped and charged you for what you'd left with. Fully automated is far from reality. Ha ha ha. Anyway, I laughed at it at first because the thought of people watching you shop and then quickly filling it in and trying to make it look like AI really, I just thought was truly the biggest grift ever. But what they were really doing, I believe, from digging into this a little bit more, is the cameras and everything was, working off machine learning, like understanding what objects you had taken and then charging it to your account. So I think that was working. But they were getting these people, very similar to the annotators that OpenAI used in the early days, to go through and basically say, oh, this was successful, or you missed this item, or you stuffed this up, to better improve that machine learning model. It would be far funnier if it was just a bunch of people sitting in India monitoring cameras every time you walked into a store. But I don't
and
think
you
that's
sort of
true.
understand that, like in a small startup that's trying to get funding, like that. What was that company where they were trying to do the wireless charging, but they realized if they actually did it, it would like liquefy your organs or something. It was like ultrasound charging or something, and they kept faking all their demos. And I'd understand that, but this is Amazon. They don't need to fake it. Like it just seems crazy that it was sort of, I guess, someone's baby project, and they're just like, all right, well, I'm just gonna pretend.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because bringing me back full circle to the start of the episode, the Meta Ray-Ban sunglasses Pro Plus, whatever they're called, they come with a warning from California. I guess it's like a generic sticker, because you know how California would just warn you, it's like everything causes cancer. We're sorry.
Yeah.
On everything. So these glasses literally have this thing on them that's warning you that they exceed some standard in how much, like, there's some sort of standard of radio waves that is permitted to like go through you, apparently. And so they allegedly exceed this standard. And so here I am walking around with my Ray-Ban Meta sunglasses on, just getting like radio waves just shoved directly on my brain now. And I'm fine with that, because I want to know what the weather is like at any moment just by saying, hey, Meta. So,
Yeah, I'd do it too.
All right, cool. So we have hopefully made lemonades from lemons. It's a fairly, honestly, preparing for the episode today, we were like, should we even bother recording anything? Should we just not show up for work this week? Because while there's a lot of cool stuff we're kind of baking on behind the scenes that we are excited to show off and share on new episodes coming soon, it's just very hard sometimes to get excited about, a slightly better model, or a pretty average like audio release from Stable, and turn up and sort of try and, like, we don't want to overhype that stuff. So yeah. Anyway, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's a pretty quiet week. All right, well, thanks again for listening to the show. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts. If you want the latest AI news, when there is some, thisdayinai.com you can sign up, and you'll get high signal there. We don't post a lot of noise there, so you'll get all the news there.
That is true. I do like the emails because everything in there is worth clicking.
And if you want to play around with the latest and greatest models, we do have Gemini Ultra over on Sim Theory now that you can try out for free. So play around with us. Tell us what you think. We did record this live and stream it on YouTube today just for fun. I'm not even sure why. We gave people about 4 minutes notice. So thanks to everyone who turned up. We will stick around after we cut this off and chat to you for a little bit if you'd like. But yeah, thanks again for listening.
All right, that sounds fun.
We'll see you next week. Goodbye.